Welcome to our Geological Leaning into the Listening series. This is a special series of conversations that we are releasing in addition to our regular Tuesday podcasts. The reason being, the acupuncture and East Asian medical profession is facing a critical number of challenges as schools close. New federal guidelines on graduate education loans will dramatically change how much students can borrow. Beyond that is the issue of eroding insurance payments, and while acupuncture is increasingly integrating into the conventional system, acupuncturists are not. What are some ways we might move through the troubles of these times? That is what this series is for. We'll be listening to the perspectives and voices of practitioners who have been engaging the challenges. It's not always comfortable having conversations around difficult or contentious topics. But listening to understand, that's a good place to begin.
We just have to get creative. And one of the reasons that I'm really trying to voice what we're doing in Oregon is because, like I said, I don't think it's the only solution, but I do think it's a very good solution. And so if there are other state organizations out there who want this information, I'm happy to share our proposal with them. They could make it work for their own state.
This is our first of a series of conversations I'll be having over the next couple of months with people on the challenges that our profession is facing. I graduated and started a practice in the late 1990s. That was a very different world from the one that we live in today. And because I've not worked in schools or national organizations, I'm pretty out of date when it comes to the current educational environment, how student loans work at this time, and the ways in which they can generate upwards of $200,000 in debt. And for that matter, the educational accreditation infrastructure, national board testing, and how further closures in schools and fewer students coming into the system might affect their operations. But I do know this: a lot of people are worried. And in the past few months, the NICBOM and ASA have been putting on town hall meetings. There's a lot of buzz in the various social media platforms, both around the concerns of how young acupuncturists can work out a sustainable livelihood with a debt that grows larger every year if they're only paying the minimum based on income. And what might happen to our profession if more schools fail and we lose the infrastructure that has supported an education and path to licensure. In this conversation, I sit down with Danielle Reghi to discuss these issues. Danielle is the president of the Oregon Association of Acupuncturists and has been involved with the Oregon Acupuncture Workforce Sustainability Proposal. She helped me to better understand how we got to the place we currently are and share some ideas on moving toward an environment where the profession would have loan caps that would prevent many from considering an acupuncture education at the postgraduate level. For sure, we are in a moment of danger and opportunity, one where the solutions of the past might not take us into the future. This is not an easy conversation, but I do think it's one that's worthwhile. Danielle Reghi, welcome to Geological.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. Is that true? I'm happy to have you here. This is a special series. This is the first of a special series that we're doing. It actually publishes separately from the regular stream of podcasts that I do because it's timely and it's important and it's contentious. And our future is being written as we speak. And you're a part of that. And so I'm really happy to have you join me for this conversation about a little project that you guys have going on in Oregon right now.
Yes.
Where you're looking to create an alternative pathway to licensure. That's a big step. That's a big thing. What started you down the path of looking for this, why bother? Why do it? I mean, you're busy, right? You have a clinic.
Yeah, I have 3 clinics.
You have 3 clinics. What's going on here?
Well, I guess I would start with I entered the profession being sold this rhetoric of you have to spend money to make money, and I was pretty uncomfortable with the price tag, but I really wanted to be an acupuncturist. I love the medicine. I thought that it would give my life purpose. I wanted a job that I could age with, that you could just get better
Mm,
with time as you aged.
it's
And
true. You can.
yeah, and I loved the idea of lifelong learning. And I also knew that I was never probably going to be independently wealthy. So I thought if I have to work till I die, I need it to like be feeding me. I want a job that feeds me. And acupuncture fit all of that for me. So I went to school with that intention, thinking obviously, like I'll be able to pay the loans back. Like I'm going to go be a professional, right? Like I'll be able to pay these loans back. It won't be an issue. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be a problem. And then I got into practice. I graduated in 2016 and I got into practice. I've been at it for 10 years. And my first job, I was working 4 days a week, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. I was seeing 4 patients an hour in a very busy clinic, and I was making less than $1,000 a month. I kind of
That's
think of
hard.
it as a paid internship at this point. Like the person who I was working under was very, very skilled, and I appreciate that from that job. So anyway, I moved into private practice and then I started seeing what insurance companies are actually paying us. And I thought this like can't be right.
Now, you didn't know any of this before? This
Mm-mm.
wasn't discussed in school?
No.
You you guys weren't talking among yourselves, hey, here's how I'm going to build my business and, here's the return on investment that I think I'm going to see.
We had some business classes that were more geared towards imagine what your business wants to be. You should make a web page, like maybe think about making some business cards. And I didn't find it to be the most helpful because I didn't know what I want. I didn't think I even wanted to start a business. I wanted to be an employee. I
And now you got three of
and
them.
now I have
Well,
three.
life takes us down some weird roads. Okay, so you've had some challenges. Look, we all have that. I don't know of anyone who's had a practice, and man, like you say, there's some internships that we go through. There's that, but we're looking. I mean, you're part of an effort right now to help there be another way of getting licensure. What's behind all of that? Why bother? Because look, you're already busy, and there's already a process in place. Yes, it's expensive, and there's that. But it sounds like something's really got your attention with this. Something really motivated you because you're already busy.
Yes, I got into the Oregon Acupuncture Association. I'm now the president. I started working with them first through legislative committee because I thought that insurance companies were predatory, right? I've now since learned that everything they do is legal, although maybe not ethical. And this is my first year as president, and I had a constituent come to me and she said, have you heard about these new federal regulations coming down from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act?
Mm.
And I hadn't heard anything of it, not a peep from, I'm the president of the Oregon Association. You would think that maybe our national association would have told us about it, but we hadn't heard any of this. Now, I remembered when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was first, when they were first trying to pass it, there was a lot of discourse around education and they were saying, they're going to put loan caps on student loans. I actually didn't think that was a bad thing and I still don't think that's a bad thing. I do think that we do need loan caps. I didn't realize, the full breadth of the bill. So there are two components to this bill that's going to affect acupuncture education. So one of them is called the RISE rule, and that is the one that is changing our loans essentially. So it's getting rid of these loans that are the graduate plus loans, which have unlimited borrowing power, and it's putting us back into this graduate loan system that existed before 2006 that have loan caps and a lifetime loan cap. So one of the reasons that many professions were upset when the Department of Education posted what degrees they feel are professional and what are not professional is because it impacts the loan caps. So the professional degrees are degrees like doctors, MDs, dentists, somehow theologians got in there. I don't know how that is. Chiropractors are in there, and
Maybe
they all
certain people
get
with certain lobbies.
Yeah. They all get $50,000 per year
Mm.
with a lifetime limit of 4 years, $1,000. Now, degrees that were not designated professional, which acupuncture is one of them, we're in that category with PTs, nurses, PAs, so things you wouldn't expect maybe. We all get a yearly loan cap of 20,500
Mm-hmm.
for a 4-year total and a lifetime total of $100,000. Now that impacts acupuncture education because most of us are paying well over $20,000 per year for our education. So the school that I went to, I believe, was between $24,000 and $28,000 in tuition alone per year. And then people borrowed also living expenses. So usually about another $30,000 per year for living expenses. So people are borrowing on average usually. Now different schools have different tuition rates, but somewhere around, $50,000 per year to go to acupuncture school, because we're encouraged not to work when we're in acupuncture school. So that $20,500 limit is going to impact people. People aren't going to be able to afford to pay for even tuition, let alone living expenses, unless tuition comes down drastically, right? And then there's a second part of this.
Okay. I just want to put a pin in this for a second because I want to come back to something, because I'm imagining being a new student and someone says, yeah, you're going to have over $100,000 of debt. I mean, that's another issue. I want to come back to that in a moment, but I just want to stick a pin in it because that is, I mean, it's so different. Yeah, it's a lot of money. And look, I grew up. Well, it feels that way. I've been at this a long time. When I was in acupuncture school, Danielle, it was such a different world. So I'm going on this journey with you of what things look like today, and it's very different from when I was going to acupuncture school. Look, prices go up, things change. I don't have any gripe about that. But what I do know is that debt can put a real headwind into someone's career. So, I mean, is it even ethical to consider? Well, we're going to come back to it. Tell me more about what's going on with the loans, because look, these aren't things I know about, and I think it's important to know.
Yeah, I mean, just on that note, I find that a lot of acupuncturists who graduated from acupuncture school before 2006, before there was like this unlimited funding for education, a lot of them have that same reaction as you. They don't understand because they don't have loans, because when they graduated, it cost $40,000 to go to acupuncture school or something like that. And they were able to work while they were going to acupuncture school. So they paid for most of it and didn't take out very many loans. So people who don't have the loans hanging over their head, especially six-figure loans, it's really, really hard for them to wrap their head around what's going on because it doesn't make any sense.
So thanks for bringing me up to speed.
But yeah, so the second part of this new legislation that they're passing, and just to go back to the RISE rule, sorry, there are some provider types who are suing the government right now, trying to raise their loan cap up to at least the $50,000 mark, because this is, like I said, going to affect many professions, and we already have a provider shortage in this country, and so this will make that worse because people won't be able to afford to go to school. Your options are going to be either the tuition has to come way down, or you're going to have to take out private loans to subsidize the federal loans that you're taking out, or you're going to have to pay out of pocket. And a lot of people aren't going to do those things, right? So this will create provider shortages, and we already have provider shortages. So it is important to name that. We'll see where it goes. But lawsuits take time. It's going to take
Mm-hmm.
years probably. And in the meantime, this is a law that the federal government passed. So this is reality of what's happening right now. So I just want to name that as well.
Okay. And you're saying there are lawsuits. This could change in the future, and acupuncture would be funded at the levels that it has been funded at, maybe in the future, but that's not going to be happening now.
Yeah, not in the short term.
Not in
No.
the short term. Okay.
So we'll see.
Just want to get my timelines right here.
But then, so there's a second part to this One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and it's called the AHEAD metrics. And this is a little bit more confusing. And it's also the one that people have been kind of ignoring because it's confusing.
Now, is that part of the big beautiful bill, or was ahead?
Yes,
It is. Okay. So
it's part of the,
it's fairly new.
yeah, it's brand new. It just got passed in January when the One Big Beautiful Bill got passed, right? But they've been talking about it. So some people kind of knew it was coming already.
How long have they been talking about it?
I think it was all in Project 2025. And then, there was a lot of discourse around the One Big Beautiful Bill before it got passed. So the information has been out there, but the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it was so massive and there was so much to it that it's hard to, unless you're like willing to read, hundreds of pages of legal jargon, you can obviously miss some stuff for sure. But so the AHEAD metrics are what the Department of Ed is using to create accountability within the borrowing system. So it's also been called the do no harm metrics. So what they're doing is they're taking from the IRS, they're taking all of our adjusted gross incomes and they're measuring that against what people in your area typically make. So they're saying that 4 years out of a master's program, you should be making more than somebody who has a bachelor's degree in your area is making. And then if you have a bachelor's degree, 4 years out of school, you should be making more than somebody with a high school diploma would be making, which on the nose sounds pretty fair, right?
I can see the logic in it. The idea is that the more education you have, the more capacity you have, the more you know, the better job you'll be able to get. That was always the thing I was told as a kid. Go to college, you'll be able to get a better job.
The problem is acupuncturists fail that metric. So with our master's degrees, they're predicting, the Department of Ed put out a report that predicts that 98% of students, so that means all students in the country, are in programs that fail that metric. So what does that mean? There's going to be a couple options. So in July of 2026, this year, the rise rule hits and the loan caps start. In July of 2027 is the first time they're going to take that metric, that measurement, and look at programs across the country. If your program fails that, and so remember, they're measuring it from people that have graduated 4 years prior. So that's looking at students from 2023.
They want to see people that are in the workforce. You should be able to apply this stuff that you know.
So if your program fails that metric, the program has to put on their website basically a financial disclaimer saying that this program is not financially sound. It's not a good financial decision for you to make. Then in July of 2028, they're going to look at that measurement again and see if any programs would pass it. But they're looking at people who've already graduated many years, 4 years prior. So it's kind of hard for programs to make that kind of a change, really. But anyway, so they're going to see if your program still passes it. And if you fail that time, then you have two options. You can create a teach out program where you stop accepting any new students, and then you just teach out the ones that you already have while you're still getting access to federal loans. And then you close your business because it wasn't a good financial, investment for people or whatever. Or if you refuse that, then you lose all access immediately to federal loans, which means the acupuncture schools very likely will be losing access to federal loans, which means that either your options are going to be pay out of pocket or take out private loans, which private loans are, I would say, probably more predatory than federal loans. That's what I was always taught. Even when I went to school, at least I never took out any private loans. So it's pretty depressing when you look at it, especially when you understand that that's really going to impact acupuncture education. And if we don't change something wildly, we risk losing pretty much the majority of our schools in this country. That's pretty much why in Oregon, we decided to try to be proactive and try to find a solution before the devastation hits.
So, but there's really nothing that you can do with the current schools and the way that they're set up and what's happening with the funding from the government, because they're going to start implementing this in a month. Next year, you get a warning label like on a pack of cigarettes. This may not be healthy for you. And then a year or two after that, they lose all their funding. What does that have to do with licensure?
So acupuncture passes if we have a bachelor's. We make more than people with a high school degree.
Okay. All right. Hang on a second. So, wow, this is an interesting idea. It's almost like going backwards in a way. But you said bachelor's because with the metric for bachelor's, then what acupuncturists make on the average 4 years out of school, that would fit the rubric for loans.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So bachelor's programs qualify,
Hmm.
master's programs don't.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine people that currently are going for a doctorate to, like, another generation of acupuncturists say, look at me, I got a bachelor's in acupuncture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very hard, bitter pill to swallow. It's a bitter pill for many people to swallow.
But that's what it would take to keep the loans going, given the way loans are going to go in the future.
Yes, probably. That's the most likely scenario that we're seeing right now. Also, if we change things to a little bit more of a bachelor's level, we could do some really interesting things. For one, bachelor's degrees are eligible for subsidized loans. So, meaning that your interest would be subsidized by the federal government. So you're not gaining interest on your loans before you graduate, right? Which happens with the Graduate Plus loans.
Oh, that makes a humongous difference.
Huge difference. Yeah. Also, there are more scholarships available to undergraduate level.
Pell Grants.
There are Pell Grants available. So there's more options for people to be able to fund their education.
I bet you get more diversity into the acupuncture world.
Yeah, exactly. So just to kind of paint a picture, for example, I went to a state school for my undergraduate degree. I came out of that state school with $16,000 in loans. I was afforded 6 months before I had to go into repayment on those loans. And at the 6 month mark, I went into repayment and interest started accruing at that time. I thought that's how student loans worked, right? Like I was young, I didn't know any better.
When I had loans many years ago, that's how it worked for me too. That's how I thought loans worked.
So that's not how the new Graduate Plus loans have been working. And I have heard some discourse that maybe they used to work that way in the past, but anyway, when I started school in 2012 and I was prepared to borrow about, I think the cost of my 4 year program was around the $100,000 range. And I thought, I was told that if I took out living expenses, I would probably feasibly come out with about $130,000 of debt. That's kind of what I had wrapped my head around, which already felt like a lot. I was also told, don't look at your loans. You don't need to be stressing about this. I had asked the financial aid advisor, I said, should I be paying on my undergraduate loans so the interest doesn't accrue on them or this interest? And she was like, no, you're back in school. You don't have to be in repayment of those loans. And why would you pay loans with loans? That doesn't make any sense. So I just kind of didn't think about it. When I graduated, I got a bill.
It depends on the interest rate.
Yeah, I mean, I was young, like I said. I just kind of trusted her. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Why should I worry about this?
You didn't sit down with a spreadsheet and look at it.
No, I didn't. I would assume probably most students don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I graduated, I got a bill for $220,000. And I was shocked. I was like, what? And then that's when they were like, oh, yeah, well, interest has been accrued. Like, you were in school for 4 years. Interest has been accruing since day one on some of these loans. And I was just like, I was so depressed. I thought I had ruined my life.
I can imagine. I would have felt the same way.
$200,000? Like 220?
This was not explained to you as part of the loan process?
No,
That it's going to accrue at this rate and this is what you're going to repay? I mean, I'm just thinking about like getting a mortgage. You know, they talk to you about here's your loan and here's how much you're going to pay back and here's the amount of interest, and you look at all that stuff. That's not in a student loan?
there's like that FAFSA class that you have to take about, loans and paying them back essentially. But no, it was really never spelled out to me in a way that I understood it at least. And I even asked the financial aid advisor, I said, if I take out loans the way that you're telling me to take them out, how much debt will I be in when I get out of this program? And she said, this is the cost of the program. And none of our students are not in repayment. Everybody's in repayment. And so I just kind of, I should have asked better questions. And that's, I think, something that a lot of students, around, the time that I went to school, and this is still happening today. So I think probably a lot of us have that same experience where we think we're asking the right questions. We're young, we're excited about this profession. We don't really know the right questions to ask because, for student loans, you're getting people before they have any kind of like credit history, before they're really established in their lives. People don't understand, the nuance of finances unless you have parents who are like financial wizards, but mine certainly weren't. My dad dropped out of high school. And my mom went to college, but her dad was a fully disabled vet from World War II. So, like, the federal government paid for her schooling, so none of them had loans. They didn't know what to tell me. My mom was just like, do something you love. Do something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life.
Now you got 3 businesses.
Yeah, exactly. And I do love it. That is the silver lining of it all. I would say I love what I do. And so, thank God for that.
Well, clearly you do. You don't just love what you do, but what I'm gathering from you is you've got a deep, deep, deep concern for the profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in addition to running your businesses and having a life, you're looking at something that's coming at our profession and it's coming at it very, very quickly.
Yeah. And I think the profession is valuable. And I want to see students be able to come into this profession, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like I was, and then not feel like they were taken advantage of when they come out of it. That was one thing that I really had to think about. So when I first graduated, I thought, oh my God, I've ruined my life. And then I thought I felt really stupid. I was just like, how could I not have like I'm not an adult. Like, what am I doing? Like there was a lot of like negative self-speak happening. I felt really dumb that I didn't ask the right questions or, that I even took the loans out and, I'm an adult, like I should have known better or whatever. So that was stuff I really had to process around it. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Well, look, schools are about to get a warning label on their program. Warning label might not be a bad idea. Like, take a really good look at this.
Take a good hard look.
Take a good hard look.
Yeah, sit down with a financial advisor.
That's really a good point. I understand schools have, financial aid person, but, it's kind of one of those things like when you're working with different real estate agents. A real estate agent has the seller's interest in mind, and you get your own buyer's agent because they have your interest in mind. Almost sounds like there's a space for people to help people understand financial aid so they can get the straight story.
Absolutely. And honestly, in later years, I started working with a student loan tutor. There's companies now that help people even manage their student loans because so many people are in the same, system I'm in. And
it's not just the acupuncture world. This goes
higher
across
education.
the educational system. Yeah, we're not just picking on acupuncture schools here. This is the state of education in America right now.
Yeah, I was at the last town hall that actually the AHM Coalition put on. AHM Coalition is the coalition from our national orgs that have banded together, and they've been doing a town hall series about this. And the director of ACOM, who is our accreditor, said himself, yeah, in the last 20 years, so they lifted loan caps in 2006, it's been about 20 years now since we've been under this system that has no loan caps. Education tuition has gone up between 40 and 60%. That's the reality that we're living in, is that there's been huge inflation with this unlimited funding coming from the federal government. And the reality is that students are not paying these loans back. It's very easy to be in repayment and still not be paying your entire loans back, right? Because of income-based tuition repayment. So with income-based tuition repayment, you only have to pay about 10% of what you're making. So for me, for example, using myself, I had $220,000 of student loans, right? I was making income-based tuition repayment. And so I was paying about $300, $400 a month towards the very end. When it first started, it was like $100 a month. And then as my income grew, I could pay more. And I was making those payments. But in a 3 years time, so between 2016 and 2020, 2016 when I graduated and 2020, all loans went into this COVID era like freeze where they stopped accruing interest. Everything was kind of frozen at that time. Because of COVID, emergency restrictions or whatever. $1,000 of interest had accrued on my original loans that I that I graduated with. So that's not including the interest that accrued on the total loans from day one when I started taking them out, but just from the time that I graduated up until the interest rates were frozen because of COVID, I had been paying $300 or $400 a month, and I still accumulated 50,000.
Okay, hang on. I really want to wrap my head around this. You are technically in repayment because you're paying based on income, but you're still on the hook for the principal, and you're still on the hook for the interest, and you're on the hook for the accruing interest as time goes on. And because, unlike a mortgage where you can pay some extra and pay that principal down faster, you're paying less toward your loan, and now you're accruing even more interest. But you're technically in repayment.
Yeah, exactly.
So the schools could say, yes, 98% of our people are in repayment, but their interest is ballooning day by day.
Yeah, you actually have to default on your loans to be not in repayment.
But now here's a thing I've heard. You're not allowed to default or go bankrupt on these loans, are you? I mean, aren't these loans that will follow you no matter whatever happens?
Yes, you can't claim bankruptcy on these loans. I do think that there are some grassroots efforts to change that law, but yeah, these loans are guaranteed by the federal government, meaning you can't just claim bankruptcy and get out of them. You can default in the sense that you can just not make payments on it, and then
I
they're going
see.
to do all the things that they would do if, you had some sort of debt. Like they would,
Yeah.
you'd get calls from a creditor, they would start doxing your wages or whatever. Yeah, so it would be, and it would ruin your credit score.
Yeah. Default's a possibility, and you don't want that,
You don't want that.
but you can't bankrupt your way out of it. You can't say, hey, game over, wipe the slate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're stuck with them for life. So the best option that you had, at the time for me was getting into an income-based repayment plan, because there was no way, like as an acupuncturist, that I was going to be able to make $2,000 a month payments for the next 10 years or something like that. So I was in the income-based tuition repayment, which I was told to do from the beginning from my school. The financial aid office was like, look, Obama has this really great income-based tuition repayment plan. You'll get into that. You'll be in repayment for 20 to 25 years, and then your loans are going to get forgiven. Now, what I didn't know at the time, so
Forgiven?
yeah, so they forgive your loans. So
Back in the Obama time, they were doing that.
they're still technically doing it, but here's the rub on that, okay? So say that I had 500, my principal had, or my loans had ballooned because of the compounding interest over time. I wasn't even making enough to make the payment on the interest, right? So say my loans had ballooned up to $500,000 in the 20 years that I was in repayment or whatever. When you get them forgiven, the IRS looks at that as income. So it would have looked like I had made $500,000 that year. And then you have to pay taxes. You have to pay a tax bomb on that money.
They're gonna get their money one way or another.
They're going to get their money.
It's guaranteed. It's a guaranteed loan. It's guaranteed they're going to get their money.
And then say that you didn't save. Like, so when I got on with the student loan tutor, they were saying, start putting money away. We'll get you the lowest payment that possible that you can make, but start putting money away into a high yield savings so that you can save for that tax bomb when this gets forgiven. But say that you didn't have that instruction and you didn't know that you had to save for that tax bomb, and then suddenly they want, whatever, $100,000 or something, $200,000, whatever it is from you, and you don't have that money saved. Like most Americans don't have just a bunch of money sitting in a bank, right? So you can get on a repayment plan with the IRS, but they're going to put interest on that. So you're just in this debt cycle that you'll just die with.
I can see the benefit in going to become an electrician or plumber.
Yeah, which is why higher education is hurting right now, because people aren't willing, it's been 20 years of this. We've been talking about the student debt crisis for a very long time. I mean, Obama was talking about the student debt crisis. So people aren't going to higher education. And we're in a reckoning at this point. Like something has to change. This isn't working. And it's also not good business for the federal government. They just can't keep handing out money that people are never going to pay back. And it's not good optics for politicians either, right? Because, like people get angry like I was. They're like, wait, why did you guys allow this to happen? There has to be some accountability here.
Well, you could see this thing that's coming in a month as a kind of accountability.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can.
this course of study might be bad for your health, financial health. And again, we're not just picking on acupuncture schools here. We're really looking at something that goes across the board. But for us, acupuncture schools is important because it's our profession and we want to see it thrive, and we're at a real crossroads with it. So that's what's happening with the money. And holy smokes, I mean, can you imagine back when you were starting, if you knew what you knew today, would you go to acupuncture school?
No, I wouldn't take out loans to go.
You wouldn't take out loans to go.
If I could find a school that didn't require student loans or that was affordable enough that I could maybe work while I was in school, or their tuition was very, very, very inexpensive, then I would recommend acupuncture as a profession to anybody. But I would not recommend taking out six-figure debt because it will stay with you for the rest of your life. It's like a black cloud that hangs over your head. Anytime you want to do anything financial, they go, wait a minute, your debt to income ratio is crazy. Why do you have $300,000 of loans? Like when I wanted to buy a house, they talked to me about this. When I wanted to buy a car, they talked to me about this. They recently just talked to me about this because I leased a car. And they were like, hold on a second, your loans are crazy. What's going on with your debt to income ratio? And I had to be like, well, my monthly payment's actually $0 right now. And then I had to show that proof that my monthly payment was that. So, I mean, it's just something that, that they talk to you about basically for the rest of your life until these loans are gone.
You've become very financially literate as a result of this, haven't you?
I've had to, yeah.
Yeah, you've had to.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's the money side, but you're looking in Oregon at a alternative path to licensure.
Yes. Yeah. So, what we're trying to do right now in Oregon actually is really pretty simple, but because it would allow things like potentially a bachelor's degree, people are kind of
Mm,
they're conflating it a little bit. But what we're really asking is one, we want standards written into rule here in Oregon, meaning that there's some basic educational standards that fit our scope of practice for our unique scope of practice in Oregon. And we want that written into the rule so that people have to teach to scope of practice to keep people safe and to maintain our scope of practice in Oregon.
hang on a second. I'm so uneducated around this stuff. There's not a rule that says you need a certain amount of education in the state of Oregon or a certain kind of education to get an acupuncture license. That's not already part of your legislation there?
Currently in rule, it says that we have to go to an ACOM accredited school and we have to pass the NC BOM, formerly NCC AOM. We have to pass their test. And so we've outsourced our guidelines for education completely to the accreditor.
Okay.
And the problem with that is that the accreditor doesn't necessarily have to look at each state's unique scope and then make sure that schools are teaching to that unique scope. They just have their overall umbrella. This is the hours that we think that you should teach to.
Okay. So the accreditor they're the ones that hold the standards. You need so much of this, so much of this other thing, so much of that, so many hours here, so many there. And then the states just go, oh yeah, check. The accreditor is, they're in compliance with the accreditor.
So 28 other states have written their standards into rule or law. And so when you have that written into rule or law, then you can still use the accreditor, but schools still have to make sure that they're teaching to the standards of that state. So I'll give you an example. Washington State, which is just across the river from Oregon.
My old hometown.
They have their standards. They have some like biomedical standards. They have standards written into their rule. So for example, if I wanted to go get a license in Washington, I would have to take a microbiology class because microbiology is not required by ACOM. And so it wasn't required in my school, but it's required in the state of Washington. So I would still have to meet the state of Washington standards to be able to get a license there. California is another example. California does have, ACOM accredits their schools, but they also have very strict regulations in California through the California Acupuncture Board. And so they have like a higher hours requirement. So ACOM only requires 1,905 hours of education total to become a licensed acupuncturist. California requires about 3,000 hours. So students at California schools have to go to school for a total of 3,000 hours, even though ACOM says 1905. So we're trying to basically write our standards into rule in Oregon so that we have some good standards that will help meet. We want to maintain portability with Washington, so we're very closely trying to kind of emulate their standards so that we can maintain that portability. But we also want to be able to have standards written into our rule that go well with what the employers in Oregon need, that we have these basic sciences so that we can kind of come across as a little bit more hireable into the general health care infrastructure, essentially.
Okay. So let's talk about that for a moment. I'm still rattling around in my mind here. Hey, this could be done with a bachelor's degree. I hadn't thought about that. Right? I need to think about that a little bit. There's always the status thing in the medical world. Well, bachelor's degree, that's just an entry-level degree. Everybody's going to go get more than that if you're going to be in the medicine field. But what I hear you saying is to make the money piece work, a bachelor degree would actually fit that, and you'd have a degree. Now, would that bachelor's degree give you what the current master's programs are giving people so that we would have the standards that we currently have?
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, so the reason that we have a master's program is because ACOM is accredited through the federal government, through the Department of Ed, to accredit master's programs. They don't have the ability to accredit a bachelor's program. So it's not even an option for acupuncturists who go to ACOM accredited schools to be getting a bachelor's degree if they wanted. In China, acupuncture is a bachelor's degree. It's a 5 years bachelor's. They have a lot more hours requirements with it, but that's what it is. In most other places in the world, when you go into medicine with their kind of like their socialized education system and medicine system, they're getting, they're going straight into medical school after high school and that sort of thing. So it's not really that different from how other places in the world are already doing it. It's just different than how we've been doing it in America. We also looked at the WHO put out a report, and I can send you that link if you want to link it in the show notes. They put out a report that says, I think they utilized like 12 different countries. Some of them were Asian countries. Australia was one of them, Canada, the United States. And they asked, what does it take to create a safe and competent provider? And so we looked at the WHO, the World Health Organization standards around that. They have a basic entry level, hours requirements kind of educational program. And then they have kind of like this extended one. I'm not saying that I don't think that we should have master's or doctoral degrees in acupuncture. I'm saying I think that we should start with a base that would create a safe and competent provider. So then that person could then go out into the workforce, maybe get some mentorship, figure out who they are as a provider. And then they would have that clinical, reasoning that they could bring to a master's program, and they could be working while they're getting a master's degree. And the master's degree could fit a little bit more of like a traditional master's degree where you're getting it in 2 years instead of 3 or 4. And then if you wanted to go on and get a doctoral degree, again, you could be doing that while you're working, while you're also gaining clinical knowledge so that you're actually getting more out of that degree. I mean, I know that you said it's been a while since you went to acupuncture school, but when I was in acupuncture school, I didn't know necessarily the right questions to ask when I was in some of these clinic seminar classes or when I was in clinic myself, because it was all new to me, right? I had no clinical experience before that. Now, when I go to my continuing education classes, like I took the Whitfield Reeves classes, I had more questions that I could be asking the instructors because I had 10 years of clinical experience backing me so that I actually knew what to ask. I got a lot more out of that program, right? So there's no reason why we couldn't have a basic level of education that we can get at an affordable rate, and then we could then continue to learn with less financial risk involved and more clinical experience.
Less financial risk, less financial cost. You just said more clinical experience as well?
Yeah.
Talk to me about
Because
that.
if you went to school and you came out and you're a safe, competent provider, right? So we know that you're safe. That's the main thing. We want to make sure that you're not puncturing people's lungs and you're not like causing nerve damage. Then you go out into clinic and maybe you get a mentor. You go work for somebody, you get a mentor, you learn a little bit more from that person. You learn what the whole system is about, or maybe you go into a hospital system or whatever. And then when you're going into your master's programs, you have that clinical experience to bring with you, and you can actually get more out of that master's program that you would be paying for.
Okay. But isn't it also true that master programs, you've got student clinic, you're getting some clinical time in your master's program? These bachelor's programs that you're talking about, will they have a clinical component?
Yeah, they have to. Absolutely.
How does it look compared to the current master's amount of clinical time?
It's literally exactly the same, almost exactly the same, except you would be taking your educational credits at a bachelor's credit level instead of a master's credit level. And what does that mean? So
Less money.
it's money.
It's less money. It's things like Pell Grants. It's probably less per credit hour for a bachelor's credit than a master's credit, or are they the same?
So I believe we're proposing, so the ACOM floor for hours is 1905. We're proposing 1800 for Oregon, so it's only about 105 hours difference. We're taking out some of the filler classes, right? And that's a bachelor's.
What would be a filler class?
So a filler class would be, I mean, people are going to get mad at me when I say this, but
I got a feeling people are already mad at you.
yeah, probably.
What's filler? I'm curious.
You don't necessarily need to take Qigong as part of the core classes, right? You could maybe take that as an elective if you're really passionate about meditation, or you can go and do continuing ed if you're really passionate about that.
Or you could go to the YMCA.
Yeah. I think Qigong is great, but I probably didn't need to pay for Qigong credits $500 per credit or something like that.
No, I would agree with you. You probably didn't.
Yeah. There are definitely components to the medicine. So there were two different schools in Oregon. OCOM closed. I went to OCOM, and we had very, very advanced kind of like herbal knowledge in our school. I mean, I took herbs for like 4 years. I did single herbs, then I did formulas, then we did patents, then I worked in the herbal medicinary, then I did an herbal clinic where all I was learning was about how to prescribe herbs safely. It was a lot of herbal knowledge, and I think herbs are an amazing tool that we have in our medicine. So I'm not taking away from that. The other school had basic intro to herbs, but they didn't go into as much depth in herbs as I did. And so, like my friend who went to that school, she wanted to continue on with herbs. So she went and did an herbal program, kind of like a continuing ed program outside. There's no reason why different components of our medicine can't be done that way. If we want to pare it down to where we're creating safe and effective providers who also can have a basic introduction to all of the components of Chinese medicine. So they're getting an education that will create, that also has cultural, understanding with it, that has some good biomedical foundation so that we can code switch when we're talking to other allied health professions. All of that should be part of the core philosophy. And then we can continue on with the things that we're most interested in. So, for example, in Oregon, I took all those herbs, but I didn't have to take the herbal board, right? I can still prescribe herbs. So maybe there's a component where, hey, you can do basic herbal patents and you can do basic supplements. But if you want to take the herbal board, then you'd go and you do some continuing ed so that you get a full breadth of herbal knowledge or something like that. There's no reason that we can't reimagine this and that we can create a system where we are basically paring down the medicine so that you are safe and effective. And then you're doing little offshoot kind of continuing education classes where you are getting more knowledge. And maybe those continuing education classes then add up to a master's or a doctoral, or a specialty if you want to go into specialized medicine.
Okay, so let me just make sure I'm following here. I think what you're saying is herbal medicine, which I also really love and appreciate and have spent plenty of time studying, traipsing around Asia studying even. What I think I hear you saying is, for this more basic level, learn East Asian medicine, learn acupuncture primarily, mainly focusing on acupuncture. If you want to get good at Qigong, you want to get good at herbs, You want to get good at some other things, Twain maybe. Those are add-ons that you do later. But let's
Yeah.
first make you a competent acupuncturist. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. But also, like, different states will have to model this around their scope of practice. So in Oregon, we've taken a look at our scope of practice, which is actually not the most broad. And we've created curriculum around exactly what our scope of practice is so that we never want to lose any scope of practice, right? We only want to grow it if possible. But we also don't want to be paying for a scope that isn't there yet, that we don't actually have, right? So we want to be able to teach to our scope, and then we want to be able to add on in our own time with our own money as our interests develop. So another thing too is, like, when I was in school, I thought I was just going to give people, I was really into nutrition, and I thought I was going to give a ton of like nutritional advice to patients, and I was going to be talking about digestion. And so I learned about all the digestive herbs, and I learned about all, that was what I was interested at the time when I was in my 20s, right? So I got out of practice and I realized I got out of school and went into practice, and I realized that insurance isn't going to pay me for any of that time and study. What they're going to pay me for is treating pain. So I have become really, really good at treating pain because, like, I'm running a business. I have employees that are counting on me, and I need to make the numbers work so that I can pay people, right? So now I've taken all of my continuing ed has been mostly in sports medicine and pain because that's what the insurance companies will pay for. And that's where we're going to be making our money. Now, if people are interested in hearing dietary advice, I have that. I can tell them that, but I didn't necessarily need to spend all of my time focusing on that. Maybe I should have taken some more pain management classes. They weren't necessarily, there were some electives in my school.
So this kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier, that you need to see what employers are looking for in the people that they want to hire. Hey, we need you to be able to treat pain and treat it really well.
Yes.
In this case, maybe if you're working in other kinds of clinics, you need to know fertility and treat it really well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what they're going to be paying for. Your scope of practice in Oregon, does it include herbs? How's that fit in?
It does include herbs. That's why we still need to have some herbal medicine knowledge in our core basics, but we don't necessarily need to have 4 years of it.
I see. Again, you've got a certain scope. You don't want to lose anything. You're putting the pieces in to make sure that all the things in the scope are covered by the education.
Yes.
And looking to wrap it into some kind of a container that makes it more affordable.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does someone get a license then? Because they're not getting it. Are they getting it from I can never remember the new name. Is it Nick Bomb or something?
Yeah, NC Bomb, Nick Bomb.
NC Bomb.
Yeah. We're hoping that they'll still work with us. We have some letters into them. They said that they're talking about it with their board. I don't see why it should be a problem as long as people can pass the test. Their accreditor also says that they need to allow people to have access to this test. So I don't see why it will be a problem. I do think national testing standard is very, very important. And I think people should have to pass board exams. That's one of the main issues I have with dry needling is that they don't have any kind of testing standard after they learn how to needle people. So that's super important. So we will always maintain some sort of a test. And, we hope that's Nick Bomb. We'll see. The license is given through the state. So the state is still if you go to a program and you pass the test, you can still get a license through the state. And that's why we're working, obviously, with the state, right, on this. We're working with the Oregon Medical Board on it.
So there could be another organization that would administer a test that meets the standards for what the state has set, and then people in Oregon can go practice acupuncture.
Yeah, I mean, California does that. They have their own test. New Mexico.
They have their own test. Does Hawaii have their own test too?
No, I don't think so. I think they have the Nick Bomb, but California has the Kale. So if you are only practicing California, you never even have to take the national board. And then in New Mexico, they do some sort of a hybrid where you still pass the national board, but you also have to pass a New Mexico like practical. you have to pass a practical, like where you needle people in front of other people. So that seems harder, actually. I don't know. I've never taken it, but it would give me stage fright a little bit, I think. So there are other states that already have their own, unique requirements. So it's not like we're asking for anything that's reinventing the wheel or brand new. This has all kind of already been done. It's just different than how we've been doing it in Oregon.
So, what's the part that's most urgent right now?
I feel that the part that's most urgent is that we have an alternate route so that we're not just in this route that is fragile at the moment. If 98, so for example, our accreditor is ACOM, right? They get all of their money through accrediting schools. There's 44 schools currently in the United States. If 98% of those programs close down, how are they going to fund ACOM?
ACOM would go away.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a state like
I mean, would they
ours,
go away or would they just operate at I mean, yeah, what would happen if enough schools weren't? All right, let me back up for just a second. How much money do the schools give to ACOM? Is it by student? Is it by income? How is ACOM funded?
the schools have to pay ACOM every time that they're accredited, and they have to get reaccredited. I believe it's every 3 years. Bex knows more
Okay.
exactly about that than I do, but it's about $35,000 every 3 years that schools are giving to this program to ACOM. ACOM is a business, so they have staff that they pay. So unlike the Oregon Acupuncture Association, where we are all volunteers and get paid $0 for being on the board, ACOM commissioners get paid, and you can pull their financials. They're a nonprofit, so their financials are readily available online. You can see that they're all getting paid six-figure salaries. The people who work there now, I'm not saying that they're like breaking it in or that they don't deserve their salaries. They do. They're doing work, right? But that's the reality of the system. The reality of the system is these people are probably not going to work for free. And so if we're down to just 2% of acupuncture schools remaining, what is that, $70,000 a year is going to be a huge change for ACOM.
Yeah. Well, if we're down to two acupuncture schools, it's game over anyway.
Yeah. Then we have a shrinking profession. This would be setting our profession back decades. And I think that some acupuncturists might be more comfortable with that because they feel like that would give them more patience or something. If there's less acupuncturists to compete with, then maybe they'll have more patience. But the fact of the matter is, if we have a sinking workforce, who's going down to the legislature and lobbying for our rights? If we have a shrinking workforce, then people aren't going to be signing up for, so for example, the OAA is a membership organization. People pay dues to be members. We take those dues and we hire a lobbyist. Lobbyists are expensive. So if we have shrinking, if people aren't paying us money to be part of our member organization, we can't pay a lobbyist. So what are we going to do? We're not going to be able to go down and fight for our rights. We're not going to be able to fight for better insurance reimbursements. We're not going to be able to fight dry needling bills as they come up. Lobbyists are incredibly helpful with that. All these things that are important to acupuncturists can't happen if we have a shrinking workforce.
You need to have numbers. You absolutely need to have numbers. And this is part of why we have needling all over in so many states, because it's not that acupuncturists don't care. We care a lot. It's just there's a handful of us and a boatload of other practitioners that are using things like dry needling, or like where I live in the state of Missouri, chiropractic colleges certify people to do acupuncture in essence through their own system. And there's a lot more of them than us. So yeah, you need a certain amount to have a critical mass to
Yeah.
be able to make any kind of effective change.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people that want to use the filiform needle. If we go away, needling isn't going to go away. It will still be here. It's just how is it going to look? Is it going to be acupuncturists doing it or will it be other people doing it? That's the question. So I'm not worried about acupuncture. Acupuncture has survived thousands of years, right? It's always going to be around in some form. What I'm worried about is our workforce. And I'm worried about setting the profession back decades and decades. And it is important to me because I do run a business. I have employees, right? If I can't employ people, I have to start making my business smaller. I have to start shutting down locations because I can't staff them. Or I have to change my business model and just do massage clinics, I guess. I don't know. I looked at the stats. I like just Googled it. It's not like I did research on this or anything, but according to Google, it says that there are less than 30,000 acupuncturists in the entire nation, and the majority of them are in California. And California acupuncturists seem to be doing just fine. I looked up, because acupuncturists are all like really talking a lot about PTs and dry needling right now. I looked up just for example how many PTs Google says are in the nation, and it's about 160,000, somewhere around there. So PTs are also doing just fine. And what are they doing? They have a really well-funded national association. They're increasing their scope of practice. You don't hear about PTs walking around saying that the field is saturated and that they're not making any money. Now, they complain about student loans just like we do, but they're not saying that they're not going to make any money. They have jobs because they've done a really good job integrating.
They're also integrated into the system in a way that acupuncturists, I mean, we're way behind with that.
And there's no reason why we shouldn't be integrating into the system more, because we have great tools that we could be using that could be fitting into the system. But the problem is,
So here's a question. Could we integrate in with a bachelor's degree? I mean, would that system take us with a bachelor's degree?
PTs began integrating in with a bachelor's in physical therapy. Now that did change, right? They're now doing doctorates as well, and this might be changing for PTs too. I don't know. I'm not a PT, so I'm not sitting in the rooms where these conversations are happening for them, but they're also going to be losing access to a lot of their loans. They're also getting that $20,500 loan cap. So this might change quite a bit for them as well. I think that we're probably going to see nursing programs going back to maybe associate level nurses, and then, nurses, it used to be that you could go, like, I'm from the country. I'm from a small town in Hawaii, an outer island. So a lot of people who wanted to be nurses would go to the community college because they didn't want to leave island, and they would get an associate's and they would go get jobs in these rural areas. Now they do all bachelors, but they're still nurses going into hospital systems with bachelors of nursing. Not all of them are becoming nurse practitioners. Some of them are. There's options, right? There's multiple entry level points of entry into the profession if you want to go into nursing. Why can't we have that in acupuncture as well? Could you imagine a world in which we had a bachelor's of acupuncture, and then if we wanted to expand on our education, we could be paying for that as we work out of pocket, and then maybe we're going to school with other allied health professionals, and maybe a nurse wants to get an acupuncture post-bac, and she could just do like a post-baccalaureate program, and then she could bring acupuncture into a hospital, and then hospital systems could see the value of it. I mean, it could open up so many possibilities for us, but we will never know unless we try it, right? And if we're staring down the barrel of a gun, and maybe all of our programs will close anyway because of these new federal regulations, why not try something new, imaginative, and different to save it? And then if it all blows up, it all blows up either way. But I just don't see how creating more access to education, more affordable education, allowing people to not be financially burdened and then go into the workforce, I just don't see how that would not be anything but beneficial.
Of course, we're talking about and we're worried about our profession. But one of the things I'm really taking away from this, Danielle, is that the other professions that in many ways are our competitors, they're staring down the barrel of the same gun. Now, they already have a bigger footprint in the conventional medical system. But as these regulations start to take effect, as monies begin to dry up, as schools and institutions of learning begin to change and adapt to what the new environment is from the federal government, then I can see your point. Over time, it's not that standards change, because you want to keep the standards. And what I hear you saying is you're looking to make sure that the standards are ensured.
Yes.
Because that's really important for scope of practice and public safety and just
Absolutely.
Being able to be a competent practitioner. But maybe we're not masters, maybe we're bachelors, but we might not be the only ones. The whole system itself might be changing. I hear what you're saying, and we're at that inflection point. We can't see what it might be in 3 years. But if I'm hearing you correctly, the current system and the way it's funded and the current path to licensure through the NC-BOM means you've got to go to, was it the ACOM accredited school? The states, at least your state, has decided we'll just take whatever ACOM says, give it a rubber stamp, we're good to go. And what I hear you're doing is going to the state and saying, hey, here's the things that we need to have competent, safe, effective practitioners. Let's get that written into law so we know what the bottom line is. And then there's different ways of training people to go do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have regional and national accreditors. There's no reason why we just have to only have one accreditor. We have standards, that we've researched. So we've looked at, what other states' standards are and where the general consensus seems to lie in that. We've looked at what the WHO says. We've also looked at our scope of practice and what would need to be in there for our scope of practice. We've been doing workforce surveys. So I've been meeting with different types of employers across the board. I met with people who are, doing acupuncture in tribal settings. I've met with people who are doing it in drug and rehabilitative settings. I've met with people who were doing it at the hospital level. In Oregon, we used to have a pain clinic through the OHS, and they had hired acupuncturists and they actually shut that program down. I wanted to know why. What were they seeing? What was the problem with it? One of the things that I thought was really interesting was he told me, he was like, it was actually making money because we were seeing primarily Medicaid patients. And so Medicaid, it's always like with state funded health insurance plans, they always want you to go to the lowest level of intervention before they tick you up. So acupuncture is a lower cost level. So they want people with chronic pain or complex pain syndromes to try acupuncture, fail that first before they go to these like medicated programs. So acupuncturists were actually working with anesthesiologists. And so they would go through rounds of acupuncture. They would be getting paid for that through, the healthcare system. And then they would say they're still having pain, so they're going to need to go to the anesthesiologist. And then the Medicaid was more likely to pay for that because they had already failed acupuncture. Where previously, if you had just tried to go to this like anesthesiologist medical intervention, maybe they would have denied the care. So it was actually working really well. He said that the reason it got shut down was because the hospital system was trying to acquire another hospital system, and people at the C level just basically were like, we need to cut costs. Let's just cut this program. But he said that the main issue with hiring acupuncturists that he was having was that our education wasn't really like uniform in the sense that somebody would say, hey, you should hire this acupuncturist because I had a great treatment with them once. But then this acupuncturist comes in, they don't know how to integrate into the system. They don't know how to do proper chart noting that would be required in that system. They don't know how to do proper medical code billing. They don't know how to code switch. So when they're talking to these anesthesiologists, they're like talking about metaphysical aspects of the medicine. And these anesthesiologists are like, what is this person talking about? So medical literacy is very, very important. And it's not something that we learn enough in our programs currently. So these are all factors that we've taken into account when we're trying to come up with some really high quality standards for the way that we would like to see acupuncturists in our state trained, so that when we do get these opportunities where these hospital systems are taking a chance on us, we can thrive in that system rather than feel ourselves confused and then confuse, others around us as well. So we've definitely tried to take all of that into account and do our research. And our research is good. I have people on my team. I'm not a researcher personally. I have people on my team who are excellent researchers. Anybody who's looked at our proposal has said, wow, this is really well done. This research is really well thought out. It's really well put together. It's a good proposal. Most of the people who are against it haven't actually even read it. So they just hear the idea of a bachelor's and they're like, absolutely not.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, fair enough. That would make people twitchy. We just finally got doctorates. It feels like it's going backwards. To go to a bachelor's, it feels like a step down. I get it. There's that.
If you think that nobody will ever pursue any other higher education, then yes, that could feel like a step down. But There are still going to be people who are going to want to advance their education. For our medical degree or for our medical license, we have to take continuing ed anyway. So why shouldn't we take continuing ed that would then eventually give us a master's, that would then eventually give us a doctoral degree, right? So there is going to be, acupuncture is a lifelong learning medicine. We are going to be continuing to advance our medicine and advance our knowledge. And the idea that somebody might come out and have a low-cost bachelor's is doesn't take away from your master's degree and all the stuff that you learned in your master's degree.
No, it doesn't. And here's the other thing. If somebody goes through a bachelor's program and they get themselves a nice little job somewhere doing what they do, and they're competent enough at it that they can keep their job, and they're really not interested in doing much more, but they're able to do their job and they can make a living and they're helping people, no harm, no foul. Some people just want a job. I just want to go to work, I want to do my thing, and then I want to go home.
Yeah.
So fair enough. If you got the itch to know more, well, yeah, you can go do that too. Yeah, it doesn't stop you from going to get more. This proposal that you have, and I have an opinion about it because I have read it. It's really good. It's damn good. It really is. Yes, all y'all out there that are listening, if you haven't read it and you're interested, it will take you a few hours to go through it because there's a lot in it and it's tight and it's referenced and you've really done your homework. I mean, you have literally looked all over the world at levels of education and you've looked at different states and their laws.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very useful document.
I think so too. Thank
so
you.
There's that. Would this in any way obstruct the current system? I mean, are you throwing roadblocks up to the current system?
No.
Or you just, no. I didn't think so from my read. It seems like you're creating another path to the same place.
Parallel pathway. So the current system can stay exactly the same, and we also have this other pathway. And if the current system is the best way to do it, that's the way that everybody's going to want to do it, right? But if it's not the best way to do it, then maybe people would take the other pathway. And I don't see why. That's just like basic like market economics. Like people are going to go with whatever makes the most sense because our dollars are valuable, right?
People tend to choose value and quality if they can afford it.
Exactly.
I think they always choose value, as much value as you can afford to buy.
Yeah.
Because value never comes cheap.
And I still think that, our proposal has a ton of value. And I also think that it has a ton of quality as well. And, the alternate is like if the acupuncture education system that we currently have implodes. I've heard people talking about certificate programs, and I do think that acupuncture has a place in higher education. I do think that we are more than just technicians. I would hate to see it just be swallowed up by other professions where it just becomes dry needling in this country and other professions are doing dry needling and we are not graduating acupuncturists anymore. I think acupuncture is super valuable, but we may have to reimagine it a little bit and change the way, because the way that we've been doing it isn't working. And, if these, I don't know, maybe there's a way in which we could go back to the way we were graduating people in like the 80s. Like I've heard, some old timers talking about how when they went to OCOM, they were going on the weekends or night courses and they were working during the day. And, but back then, they were taking a lot less hours than we were because the education was just different. It kind of ballooned into what it's become today. And I think all those hours are still important, which is why we have those hours still in our proposal, right? We have 1,800 hours. That's not nothing. That's not just a little bit of education. That's a lot of education. It's almost exactly what we have now.
Yes. Well, and there's another thing that you mentioned, and I think it's worth underscoring, which is there are certain things that might be in the program, Qigong, for example. I'm serious. I know a woman at the YMCA that teaches Qigong. She's really, really good. You don't need to have that as part of your program. The school that I went to, which was back in the mid-90s, they were basically trying to shoehorn 4 years into 3. And so they said, when you come here, you have to already have your anatomy and physiology. You have to have your microbiology. You have to have do we have biochemistry? There were a number of things There were a number of classes, and not just a few. They said, we're not going to teach these here because we're only going to focus on Chinese medicine. So go to your local community college, which is going to be way cheaper anyway, and it's probably going to be better than the course that you would have gotten from us because it takes money to put on a good course like that. It's already out in the community. Go do that before you come here.
Yeah.
So, there are great educational resources out there. Again, I had anatomy and physiology from my community college. It was a really good class. Oddly enough, I met another acupuncturist there who was
That's
same
awesome.
thing. She wanted to save money. Her program was going to offer it, but she's like, it's much cheaper to take it here. I'm here.
Yeah, that's kind of why we had first kind of started imagining this program where people could take the majority of their biomedical credits in a community college or a state school where they could
What a
get
great
in-state
idea.
tuition. Great idea. And then you could also be learning these classes along with people who are going to go be nurses, PTs, doctors, so that if we don't have it all in our own siloed little system, if we're actually going to class with people who are in the allied health professions, they won't think of us as like a bunch of hippies that are like, talking about like, I don't know, spirituality all day. They'll be like, "Oh, I went to school with her and she was actually really smart and I learned from with her. She was a partner on one of my like projects and she's very intelligent," or whatever. It could just kind of help like take away some of the stigma, and then we can have some of the more acupuncture focused credits be in our own siloed schools or whatever if we wanted to. The problem with the way that we're currently doing it, so the current system, is that ACOM, their standards say that you have to have a 3 years master's. And so they're teaching all these biomedical courses in the schools at the master's level because they're trying to, because you don't need 3 years. You could build a really, really fancy acupuncture program that went into all the different facets of acupuncture that you could like nerd out on for 3 years for sure. But it's not like necessary, right? I have a friend who did her anatomy and she went to the same school I did. She did her anatomy and physiology with her undergraduate degree because she had studied a science in undergrad. And so she didn't have to take that course at OCOM, but she still had to pay full tuition. So her class load was lighter,
Ouch. Oh,
but she was still paying the same money because it's a 3 years master's and the system is set up the way it is. And I think that's really kind of hurt them, to be totally honest. So
you're imagining something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been in touch with schools that might want to have a bachelor's degree in acupuncture?
Mm-hmm.
You have?
Yes. So our proposal is actually just setting standards. It's kind of creating framework where a bachelor's could happen, but it's not actually saying they all have to be bachelors. So with the current federal framework, if a school wanted to still do a master's, like I've heard schools talking about, we're going to do a hybrid program where half of the credits are going to be at the bachelor's level, and then you're going to finish out with the last year at the master's level, and then you're going to have a master's or something. So I've heard about schools trying to do something like that. It seems like the idea of a bachelor's makes the overall community very, very uncomfortable. And so most places are saying, okay, how can we reduce costs? Well, bachelor credits are much, much cheaper. So yes, we could do some sort of a hybrid where we're doing half bachelor's credits and then we're rounding it out with a master's. But the problem is that with the current federal framework, if we're graduating people with masters, we're going to be failing that ahead metric, right? That do no harm metric.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm starting to see the whole picture a little more clearly now. That there's not just the crushing loans, there's that. People need to be warned. We need a warning label on this. I've certainly had that private conversation with plenty of friends. We've looked at what young people are coming out with in terms of debt, and we shake our head.
Yeah.
Right? But the ahead metric, the piece about can you pay back, this is like a shell game with money, right? If we give you this money for this degree, then you have to be, in 4 years, you have to be this tall to ride the ride.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a bachelor's degree, you have to be this tall to ride the ride.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I see it.
So what
Okay.
the proposal isn't saying everybody has to move to a bachelor's degree, but it would open that up, that ability up, right, for schools. If schools need to do that to survive, then that's what they have to do to survive. And we might just have to do anything that we have to do to survive right now. And then we can reimagine it. Maybe the federal landscape will change. Maybe the president will be impeached tomorrow and everything he's done will be reversed. I don't know. Probably
Okay. But
not.
Danielle, hang on just one second. And I'll probably get some blowback for this. Let's say that happens and people are coming out of school with $200,000 of debt and they feel like they just ruined their life and they're paying back so that they're in compliance, but they're still getting more interest. So the longer you're in it, the more your interest grows, the bigger your debt goes. It never goes away. Okay. So let's just say we could do that. Why would you want to do that to a young person?
I completely
Why
agree
would you
with
do that
you.
to your worst enemy?
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And so that's why when people come in, they argue like, oh, the rise, there's a lawsuit. And so we're going to get more loan limits. And
But the loan limits don't help you in the long
yeah,
term.
you're advocating for people to be in debt. What that sounds to me like somebody who has student loan debt. Well, I don't, I got mine discharged, but I used to. So what that sounds like to me is that you're advocating for students to be in crippling debt. So like let that sink in. Tuition has to come down. We have to reimagine this system. It can't go on the way that it's going on. And by the way, schools have already been closing. Like my alma mater closed, right? There's been schools across the country, 12 of them in the past 5 years or something that have closed. So they're already closing. And the reason for that is, I mean, like my alma mater blamed it on COVID, but really it's that when I was in school, we had like the biggest incoming class that the OCOM had ever seen. The year after me, even bigger. It was like 60 people incoming or 90 people incoming or something like that. By the time OCOM closed, they were graduating 20 or something like that. Like it had drastically gone down. The incoming class sizes had been going down. And
So the demographics changed.
I think it's because people don't want to go into crippling debt, right? If you could just go be an influencer or if you could just go become like I don't know, a coach where you get a coaching certificate and then you just go online and talk about the principles of Chinese medicine without actually having studied it. The people are doing this. So is that where we want to
Yes.
be outsourcing our medicine to? Or do we want to
Well,
maybe
no, we
think about
don't.
doing this a little differently and creating a system that's sustainable that would also include lifelong learning pathways that would also include pathways for people to still get some higher education. So, yeah, I mean that's my soapbox. I'll die on it. But yeah, I think that the student loan system is predatory. I really dealt with a lot of anger towards my alma mater after I graduated because I was like, I trusted you and you put me into crippling debt. I've now like understood that the system, it's a little bit more than just like schools being greedy. Like there's all kinds of different things that go into it, accreditation standards being one of them. So, I don't fully solely place the blame on the school. I do think they could have done a better job at like financial advising, but the system the way it is not working and it has to change. Period.
Well, the system's not working, and yes, the federal government is forcing us at this point. And again, and you said this, and I would not disagree with you, Danielle. Seeing a warning label on this kind of thing, we should have one.
Yeah.
Anything that might be dangerous to your financial, emotional, spiritual health, physical health, you want a heads up on it.
Yeah. Especially when you're in your 20s and you don't know any better, like the adults in the room should be like, "Hey, XYZ would come with this."
And, now we have AI. You could ask AI, like, hey, AI, how much is my student loan going to be when I get out of school?
Yeah.
It's increasingly simple to do things like that.
Yeah, and I do want to name that there are some people who were like, I know people who paid back their loans in full. Like, so my husband went to the same school I did, and his classmate graduated, was like, well, I'm never going to make enough money to pay back these loans, and I want to pay them back. So he went and worked in tech, and he paid all of his loans back, but he's no longer in the acupuncture field, which is a bummer. He was a great practitioner. I know somebody who paid off their loans by taking out a bunch of credit cards that had zero interest, paying off the loan with the zero interest credit card, and then just like paying off the card and transferring balances and doing it that way. Um, that's a way to do
Oh,
it.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a Okay, there's a shell game for you,
Yeah,
but it worked.
it worked. Yeah, they're no longer in debt.
Oh my goodness. And they did it with shuffling the debt through credit cards, so they were basically getting out from underneath the interest
Yeah.
so they could pay down their principal. Hey, here's a question. Are you allowed to pay down the principal? Could you just make an extra payment and go, here's my regular payment and here's an extra $100 per principal and pay the principal directly? Can you do that
You
with
could
a student loan?
if you were making a payment large enough that you were taking care of all of that interest in that payment. It's a
Right.
compounding interest,
Okay.
right? And so if you are graduating with $200,000 of student loan debt, that payment is going to have to be rather large, right? And you probably should have started paying it when you were in school. Like I should have, there's now hindsight is 2020. There are so many things I could have done.
It's not always 2020, but it sounds like you've learned a few things.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is you shouldn't have to go into crippling debt to become an acupuncturist, period. And like, what if we had practitioners who weren't financially stressed? Like, imagine all that headspace that they could put towards studying, different philosophies, translating classical text, like all these things that acupuncturists think are important. What if like you were paying your bills comfortably and not financially stressed? All of that headspace that you put towards trying to figure out your finances and just like pay for your life could be going to working towards a master's degree or lobbying for better insurance rates or
Building a cash practice.
building a cash practice, building a, training program. This could actually open up job revenue like streams for people in different ways. Like the future is bright and the options are limitless if you just like allow yourself like the audacity to dream about it, right? It's funny because I've been posting on the Portland Facebook acupuncture group, which sometimes feels really hard to be in that space because the people who are against our proposal are very loud and most of them haven't actually read it. Somebody said to me, I hear that you have a dream, but dreams die hard, and my dreams had to die hard in this profession. And I was like, they don't have to, though. Like maybe your dream was just a little bit before its time, but that doesn't mean that it had to be dead or that you should have given up on it. Like we can still dream of a better future, and maybe the time is now.
Yeah. What are some of the criticisms besides my dream died and now I'm just being bitter? What are some of the other pushbacks that you're getting for this that might even have some merit?
People are very uncomfortable with the idea of a bachelor's because they have doctoral degrees and they spend a lot of money on them and they think that everybody should have to be at that standard.
So that would devalue their doctoral degree to some degree.
I think that's what they think. I personally disagree because nobody can take that away from you. Like when I was really depressed about my student loans, the one thing I always knew was like, they can't repossess my brain. They can't take away my education, right? Like they could repossess your house if you can't afford it. They can't repossess your education. That for some reason gave me like comfort. Like this is just like, this is what I get to have now. So just because other people might have a lower credential doesn't necessarily mean that your credential is invalid, right? You still get to sit on your high horse and say that you're a doctor, right? And that will inspire other people, and other people will want that. I just had one of my employees came to me and said, "I think I'm going to take the doctoral program." And I said, "Okay, well, just know that insurance isn't going to pay you more for that." And she was like, but like, I just feel like you have all this credibility. Like when I say Dr. Danielle says XYZ, I feel like people take that in more. And I want that. And I'm like, if that's what you want, think about the loans, go ahead and do that. You'll get continuing ed credits for your certification. So great. If that's your dream to do that, then you should do that. I wouldn't probably take out more loans for it, but that's your own financial path. So our doctoral degrees could just be inspiring future acupuncturists. So anyway, that's the main kind of people are uncomfortable with the idea of a bachelor's. People say it's watering down the profession. I don't see how it would be watering it down.
Having read your document, you're really solid, and what the numbers that you've come up with and where you've put them in terms of what needs to be studied y'all did do your research, and not just in the United States.
Yeah, we did.
What you're proposing is not watered down.
No, I agree. Thank you. Thank you for reading it. I appreciate you.
It took hours.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big
I mean, it's
document.
long. Yeah, it's a little daunting. When I first looked at it, I'm like, oh my God. But as I got into it, I mean, charts and stuff, I'm terrible with charts. It's just that kind of stuff is boring to me. But honestly, as I was reading through it and seeing the detail and the critical thinking behind what you were, first of all, the train wreck that you see coming and why we need a spare tire, another pathway so that we can have a profession. And then all the legwork that you did to see what are other places doing, what are other states doing. And then you put into these charts, and usually I don't like charts because I'm just not that kind of a guy. But I actually enjoyed it as I got into it because I think that you and your team have taken a steely, clear-eyed look at just where the world is. And we can have opinions about where it is and who caused it, and it's not our fault, and it's unfair, and everything else that, it's easy to have triggered when your livelihood and profession is at stake. But I think you really put something together here that is a possible path forward.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And
I encourage people to read it.
I think that people have said that, we haven't seen what other states are doing enough or whatever, but the fact of the matter is we don't think this is the only solution to the problem. Like there are multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak, right? But this is a solution to the problem, and this is a solution that takes student loan debt into account, and this is a solution that also takes the new federal framework into account. And some of the criticism that I get online is that I'm creating this issue, that I'm creating a problem out of nothing because this federal law is going to get revoked anyway. And I have 6 years of legislation experience working with the Oregon Acupuncture Associations with our legislative committee. And what I have seen in that time is that legislation does not move quickly. So this bill has been passed. It is the law right now. That's the law. And so if we're going to wait for it to be changed, that's going to take a number of years. And
we could be gone by then.
Our schools could be closing by then. And so people have said, well, some schools are going to have to close. And look at chiropractors. Chiropractic schools have been closing, and they're down to like very few left, and they're still doing fine. I just think I would never prey on the downfall of another business, for one. And so just saying that schools are just going to have to close is just like a little heartless. They are businesses that employ lots of people. Those are, like the school that I went to, people had been working at that school for 30 years. So that was a huge loss to them, right? And then on top of that,
it was not an insignificant school either. It was a big school.
Big school. Big, best in the country, they said, kind of school. So, and then on top of that, it's hard to start a school. Like schools aren't just going to like spring up out of nowhere. So why don't we just try to preserve the ones that we have that have all these great teachers and all this institutional knowledge? Because starting a small business is hard in general. Starting a school is even more hard. So the idea that we're just going to lose a bunch of schools and that's fine, it just is short-sighted to me. I personally think it's short-sighted. I don't agree with it. Other people have their reasons for why they do agree with it. It is what it is. I would like to preserve the schools that we have. And I think that the education could be reimagined and it could benefit everybody. It could benefit the students. It could benefit the practitioners. It could benefit the schools. It could benefit the workforce. It could benefit employers if we are taking more employer surveys into account. So it could just make the whole system better if we just have like the faith that it will.
And so your ask of the Oregon legislature is to put this into rule, to be able to take, here's the minimum requirements that you need for an acupuncture education, just make it part of the rule of law.
Yes, all we're asking for is for our standards to be written into rule and for them to say that we could have ACOM approved school, we could have a state or sorry, a regional or a national accreditor approved school, which is what for example, the national accreditor is who accredits the community college, and the PSU, Portland State University, that kind of thing.
So there's pathways to that. There are organizations and pathways that you could utilize to do that.
Yeah. Or it could be a state approved.
Choice.
It could be like state approved
Choice.
program, but that one might need to have a little bit more work put into it. If it was a state approved program, we would need to it would basically be doing like what California is doing, but we would need to take some time to kind of like really come up with a fiscal impact for that. But we don't need to just have the ACOM standard just be the only standard in Oregon, which is currently what it is.
You're asking for a little diversity in the educational world.
Yes, education diversification.
Education diversification.
That's our slogan.
It's gutsy.
Yeah, thank you.
It is. It's gutsy. And again, it seems to me you're taking a cold, clear-eyed look at what the situation is, and you're not blinking, and you're not ducking, and you're not crossing your fingers and hoping, well, we hope this gets reversed later in the next election cycle.
Yeah, we're trying not to engage in magical thinking. And I do think that I've always been a rather logical person. Biomedicine and acupuncture school was the easiest. Those were the easiest classes for me because they like just made sense to the way that my brain works. I'm very like logical. And I really, I wanted to be an acupuncturist. I loved like the magic of it. I loved, learning about it, and loved learning about the different system. But there was some magical thinking that I had to take place. Like, it's okay if I'm $130,000 into debt and then getting out and being 100,000 over that. Like, there was a little bit of magical thinking that I participated in, and I realized that is pretty rampant in the acupuncture world. And so I like to just work with like the facts. The facts are right now that there is a crisis, that it is coming faster than we would like it to, and that there is no other current national plan, because I've been going to the AHM coalition town halls, and they're saying things like ACOM literally said that they're a 501c3 so they can take donations, so that we could be donating them money so that they can stay afloat.
Who's going to donate them money?
Acupuncturists, I guess.
Acupuncturists don't even donate money to their state organization.
Yeah, I know. Some do.
Some do, and all y'all should.
They're looking into private loans. That's something that they're talking about. Some schools right now. So the loan caps take place starting July 2026. So some schools are starting their programs June of 2026 so that they can still get that last little bit of the bigger loans. Several schools are doing that actually. So right now the plans are just kind of reactionary and hoping and praying that something changes. And that just I don't see why we couldn't be a little bit more proactive rather than just purely reactionary about this. So that's the stance that we're trying to take in Oregon. Like I said, I have heard of other schools that are saying that they're going to do some sort of a hybrid model. We're going to teach half the credits at a bachelor's level, half at a master's. But then you run into the AHEAD framework or the do no harm metrics that will be a problem for even those schools. So we just have to get creative. And one of the reasons that I'm really trying to voice what we're doing in Oregon is because like I said, I don't think it's the only solution, but I do think it's a very good solution. And so if there are other state organizations out there who want this information, I'm happy to share our proposal with them. They could make it work for their own state, right? What works for Oregon might not work for other states. But I've also talked to school administrators who are like, yeah, this is really bad and we're trying to figure it out. If you look through our proposal, you'll see that the president of NUNM is in support of the proposal. That doesn't mean that she's necessarily going to start a bachelor's program tomorrow, but she does think that our proposal is a good idea. And like I said, our proposal is not like you have to have a bachelor's. It's just opening up frameworks for schools to be able to be a little bit more creative, because right now we have a system that's very, very you can only do it one way and that's it.
And it produces a ton of debt if you're taking loans. So there's that piece. Yeah, this AHEAD metric really throws a spin on it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Right now, the AHEAD rules, today is actually the last day that you can comment on it. They open for public comment. So basically a law gets passed, right? And then there's time to implement that law. And part of the implementation process is they allow public comment on it. So a lot of people are saying, oh, we're just going to flood this with public comment, and then they're going to change it because this is so bad, right? It's going to kill basically naturopathy, acupuncture, art education, like a master's of art. That's not going to be a thing anymore. Masters of music, that's, probably not going to be a thing anymore. So there are, different, it's not just us that are dealing with this. But the thing is that
And it's not just us that are dealing with crushing debt.
no, many
And
people.
I suspect there's many people in art school, they're not making the metric either.
No, they're not. Art is one of our Masters of Art programs are one of the ones that are definitely on the chopping block with this ahead metric for sure. So people think that it will change because the rule, like you can't, okay, this is literally what somebody told me. So what happened with the rise rule, which is the one that's putting the loan caps on it, is it went for public comment, right? Everybody asked for us to all be, considered professionals. And then because this is all kind of like part of the preordained plan of this bill, they just denied all of that. And the rise rule, it looks exactly like they wanted the rise rule to look, right? So now there's some lawsuits being filed against it, and they're trying to change it so that we get more debt. So people are advocating for more debt for students. So, that is what it is. Because that rise rule affects nurses, it affects PAs, it affects PTs. All of these organizations are very, very well funded, right? So they have money to throw at this. The AHEAD framework is the rules are still being written on it. We have an idea. They've already told us what they want the rules to be. So we're putting public comment in on it now. Most likely it's going to look exactly how they're going to want it to look, right? And the fact of the matter is that PTs, nurses, all these well-funded entities, they all pass the AHEAD metric. So they're not going to take their money and start lawsuits for the AHEAD metric just to save naturopaths and acupuncturists, right? So we're going to have to figure out how to do that.
So in essence, with the AHEAD metric, these other professions, they've got the capacity to pay back their loan.
Yeah.
Because they're making enough money.
Yeah, I think the average PT 4 years after, I think the Department of Ed released this information, and it says that, the average PT 4 years after they graduate from school, they're making about $90,000. So they pass. With acupuncturists, we don't pass because it shows that we make like $40,000 to $50,000, and we should be making like 60 or something. I can't remember the exact words off the top of my head, but yeah, 98% of students are in programs that are going to fail that metric.
Yes. I've heard the argument too that many people are self-employed, and because they're self-employed and you can take deductions, you want to make your income look as low as possible so you can pay less tax. And so that might be artificially making it look like we're making less money. But look, if you're running a business and you're taking all your proper business deductions, then that indeed is, your net is your net if you're taking your proper business deductions. And why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Any other person that is self-employed is going to be taking all the deductions that they can take as well. That's just kind of how the game runs.
Yeah, exactly. And, they don't, the metrics don't take into account how many people are full-time working or versus part-time. A lot of acupuncturists work part-time and don't work full-time. But the fact of the matter is, part of the reason that we're in this...
And some work triple time like you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for noticing that. Thank you for seeing me. But the fact of the matter is like, yeah, a lot of these professions, nurses, PTs, one of the reasons why their adjusted gross income passes it is because they come out to jobs. They have jobs waiting for them when they come out of school. And acupuncturists have more jobs now than we had in the past, right? Like there's more ability for people to become employees than there was even when I graduated 10 years ago. But for the most part, like we're not graduating into high, well-paying jobs. And that's something that our national organizations, I believe, should have been working on 20 years ago. But unfortunately, they didn't, and we're all mostly self-employed. And so, yeah, this is the reality of the situation.
So I want to say something about the self-employed piece. And this is just my opinion. When I went to acupuncture school, there were no JOBs. Get a job after acupuncture? Nobody in the late 90s was getting a job after acupuncture school. You knew going into school that you're going to have a practice. You're going to have a business of your own. I did not see that as a bug. I saw it as a feature, in part because I've been self-employed for much of my life. And I was not looking for a job. Part of what drew me to acupuncture school was the interest I had in it because, man, this is weird stuff and what's going on. But I also saw the possibility that I could have a practice that would sustain myself and my family in a lifestyle that I aspired to live. I saw that that was a possibility, but I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking for a practice. And that was just my mindset. I get it. A lot of people are looking for a job. If you're really, really looking for a job, and this might be a little inflammatory on my part, but what the heck? This has been one of those conversations, right? If you're really looking for a job, and you might want to have something like filiform needling be a part of it, why wouldn't you just go learn to be a PT? Because there's jobs, it's integrated in the system. In many places, you can use this rudimentary form of acupuncture, and it's growing. Right? Their scope keeps growing because acupuncture is a great and useful tool, right? This gets back to the thing of who's going to be doing acupuncture in the future. Will it be acupuncturists or someone else? Acupuncture will continue to penetrate into our culture and into our medical system.
Yeah.
If you're a young person and you're looking and trying to decide this path or that path, maybe chiropractic school makes more sense. Maybe PT school makes more sense. Maybe, I don't know, are nurse practitioners doing acupuncture now too? I don't know. Maybe.
They will be, I'm sure.
So again, I'm not saying that we should put our feet up and close our eyes and roll over, but I really appreciate what you're doing with looking at how can we take acupuncture forward into a landscape that's a new landscape and into a world where the stock of acupuncture in Chinese medicine schools, it ain't going up, it's going down. If I was a young person looking at acupuncture training, I'd be like, well, is that school even going to be here when I get done? So to hear that you are looking at ways of making it possible to keep bringing new people into the profession in ways that continue and support the standards, in ways that respect the scope of practice with proper training, it's heartening.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, when I get really depressed about the state of it all, those are the thoughts that also run through my head. Like, is this just all just going to be like dry needling one day? Are we losing our profession to PTs, that kind of thing? And working on this has been like the one thing that's given me hope in a long time about our profession, because like we can reimagine it to look differently. And something that my team talks about quite a bit is, what is our North Star? Why are we doing this, right? What's the North Star? What's the guiding light? And the guiding light is for those people who are dreaming to become acupuncturists, who've maybe wanted to become acupuncturists their whole life. One of my colleagues, she's wanted to be an acupuncturist since she was 9 years old. I didn't even know what acupuncture was when I was 9 years old, but she did, and she wanted to become an acupuncturist. I hear about that all the time. More and more I hear about that, where people are like, I've been wanting to be an acupuncturist since I was in high school, and I first learned about it. I wanted to become an acupuncturist, and I want to give those people the best opportunity to be able to realize those dreams in a landscape that doesn't feel like harmful or hostile to them, which is kind of how it feels for some of us right now, right? Insurance reimbursements and, all the things, we could get into all the problems with it, that is like really wearing people thin, and student loans are certainly one of them as well. But yeah, our North Star is because we want people to have access to this education, because we want people to have access to this medicine, because all of us who are in clinical practice can think about that patient who was told that they were going to have some crazy surgery, and then they got acupuncture and they no longer had to have the surgery. Or the people who are in drug rehab clinics who are like, acupuncture helped me with my dream disturbed sleep and all the like nasty side effects of coming off of like intense drugs. Or the people who have been dealing with chronic pain their entire lives, and acupuncture was the first thing that like made their life become manageable again. Acupuncture is more than just like trigger point needling, right? It's a system that is like beautiful and helps people every day. And I believe in access to care. That's why I believe that if we're not graduating students, that this will be detrimental to us beyond like everything else that we talked about. People deserve to have access to this medicine. It's an amazing medicine, and it's here for a reason. And we need to like not be gatekeeping it. We need to be sharing it. And that's my North Star personally. That's why I'm doing this.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And thank you for your time today. I have learned a whole lot. Look, I've heard stuff about loans and warning labels. And, I got to practice in a podcast. I haven't been looking at this larger thing that's going on. So I appreciate you sitting down with me and walking me through it. The RISE rule, that means one thing. The the ahead metric that puts a whole spin on it. It's a funny shell game. And at the end of the day, what we want is high quality practitioners who are skilled and trained.
Yes.
And capable of making it a wonderful life. So they can look back on their career and go, I'm so glad I've been doing this.
Absolutely.
Help their communities.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. If people want to get in touch with what you're doing or they want to read that proposal, how'd they find you?
President at Oregon Acupuncturist with an S at the end.com. And it's on our website too. So if they go to the Oregon Association of Acupuncturists website, they can find our email addresses and that sort of thing there as well. I also am on Substack under Holistically Driven. I am on, we have OAA has an Instagram. I have a personal Instagram of Holistically Driven. There's plenty of ways to get a hold of me.
Okay. We'll put it on the show notes page for people too, so they can just pop to the Qiological website and click, off they go.
Awesome.
Danielle, anything else you'd like to share with folks before we wind it down? I've already kept you way too long.
Yeah, I just think read the proposal with an open mind, and we are open to feedback. We want productive feedback. We're open to productive feedback. So read it with an open mind, send us your productive feedback. This is a process that we'll be continuing. So we want to make it the best that it can possibly make it. We want, the reason we're doing this is because we care about the medicine, because we don't want to see it go away.
And you've got all this extra spare time with your 3 clinics, so why not work on it?
Yeah, why not?
All right, Danielle. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks so much.
I appreciate the perspective that Danielle brings to the larger conversation of what's happening in our profession. To some degree, we're looking at the effects of the increase in student loan amounts for graduate education that began back in 2006, and how the integration of acupuncture into the conventional medical system has gone differently than expected. By and large, while there increasingly are jobs for acupuncturists, the majority of practitioners will still be running their own businesses. This is a part of the work that we didn't get training for in our schooling. It's not a significant part of the curriculum, and running a business is part of what you need to know if you're planning on private practice. I certainly agree with what Danielle heard in school, that it takes money to make money. But there's a big difference between borrowing money at compound interest and bootstrapping that money. It's something to consider because sometimes it does make good sense, really good sense, to borrow money in service of building something that will allow you to not only make that money back, but provide you with a tidy living as well. But the numbers for that, they have to work in your favor. How is it that we managed to get through high school without a modicum of financial literacy? That is a systemic problem that more than acupuncture students face. And it's one of the reasons that I like to talk about business, or as I like to call it, the practice of practice here on the podcast. The main thing I take away from this conversation is that the problem with student loan debt isn't just a problem for the acupuncture profession. It's a problem for our society at large. And the methods and metrics the government is bringing to the problem will dramatically affect the viability not just of acupuncture schooling, but other educational institutions as well. Because we're acupuncturists, it's up to us to do what we can to protect and perhaps reconfigure our profession so new people can learn the trade and move it forward into the future. As I said in the conversation, I think the work they are doing in Oregon to create a parallel pathway to licensure, it seems like a good idea. But see for yourself by reading the proposal, and do plan on spending a couple hours with it. Yes, that is a bit of a commitment of your time, but if you're concerned about an uncertain future, then it's worth spending some time to see what some thoughtful people are putting forward. You may have disagreements and other ideas. For that matter, I suspect my opinions and views might shift as I have conversations with other guests that we'll be having here on the series. That is because I don't have any hard and fast opinions on what the future should look like. And there's a lot that I don't understand about this particular moment that we're navigating, which again is the reason for this series. To have an opportunity to hear from folks who have been putting some thought and effort into helping the acupuncture and East Asian medicine profession adapt and thrive in the changing times that we find ourselves in. If you have found this podcast conversation to be thought-provoking, share it with your friends and colleagues. And beyond that, maybe even more importantly, mull it over. Discuss the merit of the ideas from this conversation and the ones that we'll be bringing you in the next few months. I can assure you that you'll be exposed to some perspectives that you like and agree with, and others that you might find suspect. My intention with this series is not to tell you what is right or wrong, but to bring pertinent conversations to the public forum so that together we can find a way into the future where acupuncture thrives in the marketplace, so that we can take the medicine that has been entrusted to us, teach it to the next generation, and help them to build thriving practices that serve their communities.